welcome to the belated commentary for Yours Anonymous, the movie. My name is Jacob Boyer, and I have two other commentaries recorded, one with the author of the book, Mr. Orr, and one with one of the producers and actors, Couper, Godleski, a good friend of mine. I don't know what happened to either of those two tracks. They're somewhere on my laptop, so I'm going to try and find them, and maybe I'll upload them as well. But we'll see what happens. That intro that you just saw was, for any Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez fans out there, that was an HD remake of the feature presentation slide that played before the Grindhouse double feature that they did, Planet Terror and Death Proof and all that. Both are very good movies. I highly recommend them. And those were taken from Grindhouse movie theaters who would do like B-movie double features back in like the 70s and 60s and 70s, I believe, is the time frame. And I found an HD version on YouTube that had been redone, and I was like, that looks cool. I kind of like it. I'll use that for my feature film projects from now on. This was one of the last things we shot. That was my arm that just came up right now, and I still think that looks really cheesy, like really stupid. It's trying to, with the music and the way we shot it, it was trying to set up to be dramatic, sort of, but it still feels really cheap to me, the way it just comes up. It's supposed to be Ashley grabbing the note and then falling and hitting his head, the event that we later reveal is how he died. But it still just doesn't look good to me. I don't know. It's probably just me being nitpicky as a director. There's Mr. Long in the background. He was a physics teacher that I had my junior year of high school, and that was a janitor. And in front of those people is the very, very talented Miss Felicity Bell. She plays Mary Ellen Gerhard, as you hopefully know. Hopefully this isn't your first time watching the movie. I love it when people do those jokes in commentary, where it's like, hopefully this isn't the first time you're watching this movie with the commentary going, and I just did it. So, yay on me. And there's Mr. Orr. That's my laptop that he was using because we needed the prop. Funny enough, this is the room that they're in right now is the media room, I guess you would call it, in my old high school. Kind of funny to think why they would be meeting in there, but that was where I had mass media, where I sort of learned how to use the cameras properly and edit on better programs than just iMovie. So I owe that class a lot to developing my talent, I guess, as a cinematographer or director, video editor, whatever. And here is Kiki Kid, also a fantastic actress.
I have just a few questions to ask.
She did 2 days on the. Most people did 1 to 2 days recording their stuff for this movie. Felicity did almost an entire year. Felicity and Mr. Orr both did almost an entire year, just because we had to reshoot some stuff.
What are your plans for college?
And it just schedules sometimes didn't line up the right way. So I feel so bad. I basically made Felicity keep the exact same hairstyle and keep bringing back the same exact clothes, almost every other day not almost every other day, at least once or twice a week for almost an entire year. Just because of continuity, we couldn't have her do anything with her hair, make her look anything different to keep continuity. And then, funny enough, pretty much right when the movie was done, she cut her hair. She basically shaved her head, and now she wears her hair very, very short. But yeah, it was. I'm very thankful that all of the actors managed to. Not managed, but they decided to help me out with this, because I I didn't pay them. It was a labor of, it's the true independent film story, I guess you would call it. It was all a labor of love, and we were all in it to see the final product. This song that you're hearing right now was written by a friend of mine, Schell, from the swimming team. He is an aspiring singer-songwriter, and he gave me two tracks that he had written and sort of produced himself, and I liked both of them, but this one I felt was we would have used both of them had we been able to shoot the original script, but when I found out that we wouldn't get the chance to shoot all of the script, I couldn't really find a place for the second one, so I just figured I'll put the first one over the credits here. But speaking of which, so I can get it out of the way, the reason why some people ask me this, the one time I've screened this in front of an audience, somebody asked me why was it in black and white, and other than me being a very pretentious film student, the reason why it was in black and white was the original, how I had written the original script was it would transition between interviews to flashbacks that would show whatever the characters had been talking about in the interview, maybe at some points from different perspectives, so you could it was basically, it would give more character development for the person who was being interviewed at that time, and it would also very highly illustrate what actually happened with Ashley and all his friends the year prior. But everybody was so busy that we just didn't have time to get everybody together to do these scenes, and I really wish we did, because it would have turned out great. But the point of it was we were gonna have the interviews in black and white, and then when we went to the flashbacks, it was going to be in color. So that's basically the reason for my pretentiousness in this movie. And here you see another very good actress, Hannah Reeder. She plays Ashley's best friend, Paisley, and when we had her come in, she was really excited to do it because she was actually replacing somebody else who had read for the part, and I thought they did a great job, but their availability just didn't line up at all. So I asked her to come in, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, I love this character. This is one of my favorite characters from the mock trials that we did years ago." And that's actually, for those of you who don't know, the story was taken from I don't know if Mr. Orr wrote the book first or he had come up with the idea for the mock trial first, but basically, Mr. Orr was an 8th grade social studies teacher of mine, and one thing that he would do was he would run these simulations in his class to teach instead of writing on a chalkboard and lecturing. He would teach by doing, basically. And when he taught the judicial system, he took on the role of, it was basically the class was like a big role playing game, pretty much. He took on the role of as the judge. He would tell us a court case, and he would tell us everything. Like, he would tell us who was guilty and all that, and he would assign us parts. Like some students would be the prosecution, some would be the defense, then the rest of us would be witnesses, and he would actually bring in another class who knew nothing about the case to be the jury. And that's where I first heard the story of Viewers Anonymous. And then a few years later, I was working on a script in the local library, and I sort of hit a wall. I didn't know where to go with it. So, and I started thinking about this, and I was like, oh, this would be a good story. So, and I knew that he had turned it into a book, but I had never read it. So I emailed him and said, hey, Mr. Orr, you probably don't remember me. I'm an old student of yours. would you mind terribly if I adapted Yours Anonymous into a movie? And he was just all on board with it. He loved the idea of doing it, and the fact that he remained so dedicated to it for such a long time was pretty cool, because I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I emailed him about the idea towards the end of my uh, towards the end of my sophomore year, and then I went almost all of my junior year. I didn't follow through on it for whatever reason, and then towards the middle of junior year, I got back to him about finishing the script, and then I spent that summer between my junior year and senior year finishing the script, and then and my whole senior year was spent shooting the movie. And then editing was I didn't work on it all summer because I just didn't have I couldn't access my editing program that I like to use. So I just had all the footage saved on this big 500 gig hard drive, and then I edited it over the course of a month my freshman year of college. So this took almost 4 years to do, and I don't know. It's a crazy story, but that's basically how it happened. And then that's another thing. Like if you a little bit of trivia, if you well not trivia, an Easter egg, I guess, for anybody who cares enough to watch the whole thing. Those posters behind the interview subjects' heads, they are constantly changing. Like I don't know if the posters change physically or if just the arrangement of them changes, but that basically happens all throughout the movie just because we shot it over the course of the year. Like right here, let's see if there's anything different. And this is also my good friend Brynne McMurchie's scene. Yep, they're different. She also stepped in to replace somebody, and she was not too confident in her acting ability, but she's good at playing a snob, and that's what the character called for. So that's one reason why I asked her. Also, out of sake of convenience, just because I didn't really have many other friends who could step in to do that part. That's actually how a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but some of the roles had to be recast to fit what I had. Also true. That's as Robert Rodriguez would call it. That's El Mariachi style filmmaking. You gotta work with what you have and hope that you get a good product out of it by the end. One other thing you might notice is that sometimes the quality of video in scenes will change. Like in the previous scene, it was kind of grainy. That was because we shot that scene on, I don't remember the model of the camera, but it was shot on tape, DVC tape. And this scene was shot digitally on a friend of mine, Rob Morrissey, who I'm very, very thankful that he let us use his camera because it was a fantastic piece of equipment and it shot some really quality video. But yeah, some scenes were shot on tape and some were shot digitally. We had two digital cameras. We basically used four cameras throughout the entirety of this movie. There was a Canon GL, which we used for one scene, the scene with when Mary Ellen and Dr. Todt, the coroner, are walking down the steps, and we had a lot of problems with that camera just because it was so old. So I replaced it with the other tape camera, and we would basically use tape whenever Rob was unavailable to shoot. And that was also, it was out of necessity that we used the tape only as a backup, just because I really didn't want to have a lot of variation between video quality between scenes. So if anything looks especially grainy, that was because we probably shot that footage on tape. And I tried my best to make sure that we didn't have variation between scenes, that like not between shots, so that whenever Mary Ellen is talking and then cutting to somebody else, it would be the same method of shooting. just because we would look too awkward. But of course, Murphy's Law, I said we're going to try not to do that, and then that ended up happening. That was in the scene with the interview between Mary Ellen and Duwain and Brent. Everything with Duwain and Brent, I believe, was shot digitally, and everything with her, or at least the part that Brent was on screen, was shot on tape. And you can tell on the audio, I tried my best to fix it, but the audio quality is much higher in the digital version than it is in the tape version. But we did our best to cover it up. And this was also these text screens. They were meant to be at the end of the movie. We see Mary Ellen typing up she wants to interview these people and turn it into a book to bring Ashley White justice is her main goal. And those were those screens were meant to fill in the place of the flashbacks, to just really drive home every point that was said in the previous interview, so that the audience would know exactly what was going on. Because I couldn't show them with the flashbacks because we never shot them. And again, I could have done a better job addressing this in the movie, but she's doing these interviews because the fictional school that these characters go to makes it a requirement that they're juniors. This is more addressed more so in the book than it is in the movie. I should have written it more into the script. We have a few lines that address it, but we don't go into as much detail as I probably should have. But basically, the students are required to do a grad project where they commit a graduation project, where they commit X number of community service hours towards something that they want to do as a career. And Mary Ellen is an aspiring criminal justice major for college, so she did something that A, she was passionate about, and B, she felt like it was her moral duty to help a student that couldn't have helped himself. And I talked over his first few lines, but the guy you're seeing right there is a good friend of mine, Evan Holland. He and I, we went to from middle school onward. We were in the same schools and same classes together for the most part, but he and I really didn't get to know each other well until mass media, I like to think, because that was when we started working on video projects together. It was a good friend of mine, Brennan Borse, and Spencer Cobb. We all worked on video projects together in mass media. Those are some like the quality of them weren't good because we were still trying to figure out how exactly one makes short films and videos and editing and all that. But I had a lot of fun doing that, writing those and shooting those and editing those with him. Our final project, I'll always remember this, like the last day of school, our junior year, was the entirety of the day was spent editing our final project for mass media, and that was so much fun to go from just the raw footage to then the final cut over the course of like a half day of school. And then when we were finished, we brought in all the teachers, and it was so much fun. But now I'm getting off track. Let's see, what else can I talk about with this scene? And the posters changed, of course. I don't think this was shot any different with the video quality. No, this is both digital. And then also, just to clear up, the reason why Mary Ellen's clothes change in between scenes was we sort of had a plan mapped out as to what interviews she did on which day. Mr. Orr has the line in the beginning where he says, "Who are we going to talk to today?" That's implied that they've been doing these interviews over the course of 3 days, because Felicity had 3 outfits she went to. This black one, I believe it was orange and white. Not that it matters because it was black and white. Orange and white striped top, and then her gray and white striped hoodie that she wears during Mary Ellen's interview, and then when she confronts me at the end, spoilers. Again, hopefully you're not watching this. this is not the first time you're watching the movie all the way through. But this was also I can't hear it right now because I have it turned off just to not mess with my audio for recording this. But the line Evan just said was when he said, "You're a junior, right? Have you read The Great Gatsby?" And he starts comparing the Marty character to Gatsby. That was actually by pure accident. That was something that was in the original script a lot. There were a lot of Great Gatsby reference, and I don't know what references. And I don't know why that there were. I would write them in, and then after I wrote it, I would be like, oh, huh, that's weird, because that was not really one of my favorite books I read in high school. But it just happened that there were a lot of analogies that we could work with. Actually, in the original script, there was a scene in which the characters were in Ms. Lehrer's English class. You'll see her played by Mrs. Toto, another middle school teacher of mine. But they were in her class, and she was giving a lecture on the similarities and differences between Romeo and Juliet and The Great Gatsby. And the point of the scene was, it ended with her saying they're similar because they're both star-crossed lovers, if you will. They're both attempts at romance that failed. Not the books, the stories within the books. The main characters tried for a romance and it didn't work out, and it ended in a tragic way. A tragic romance. I should have thought of that phrase earlier. And it was supposed to be this big metaphor for the rest of the movie, because obviously the romance between Eminem and Ashley is completely non-existent. It doesn't even get off the ground, but it's something that Ashley very much wanted. He wanted to at least he wanted to. I think his ultimate goal was he wanted to try and go out with Eminem at least once, or say that he went out with the most popular girl in school. It was just like something he really wanted to do, because he was like the nerd, and it's every nerd's dream to get the girl and make the bully look like a fool, and then walk across the football field with Simple Minds playing in the background. So yeah, that was the point of that scene. To make a long story even longer. And now you're seeing Morgan Strobl, and she wasn't really, and this is where you can see the difference. This was shot on tape with Felicity right here, and then Morgan's shots were done digitally. And then in editing, I had to match the frame rate, and that created a bit of a choppy look whenever we cut to Morgan. I should have done a better job of fixing that, but that would have taken a very long time to try and match. I'm sure there's a way you can do it automatically in the program that I use, but I haven't discovered it yet. And hopefully I'll never have to shoot on tape again, because that process is terrible. What was I talking about before that? I can't remember. And the posters are different, of course. That notebook, actually, that's a funny story. Was we always, whenever we set up the scene, Felicity would sit down in the chair, and I would pull out one of my notebooks from my backpack, flip to an empty page, and I would tell her to just use it to write notes. And the notes that she would come up with were hilarious. Like, they would always, like, sometimes it would be about the movie, sometimes it wouldn't be, but like whenever it was about the plot, whenever she was writing in character, if you will, for Mary Ellen, she was always writing stuff like, Marty's a jerk, Ashley, it was an accident, question mark, question mark, question mark. It was really funny. It was just like these really I don't know. They might not be funny to everybody, but they were amusing for me and Mr. Orr. Just like little blurbs about what was going on, and sometimes it wouldn't even be what was going on. I think at one point she had a game of hangman with herself in the notebook. I think I could be misremembering that, Felicity. I'm sorry if I am, but I believe that was something that happened. And I also talked over it, but the character that was another a very talented actress, Sarah Lynch. She was actually I held 2 auditions for the movie back in the beginning of my senior year when I was still planning to do this. Uh, Among the people who the people who came to audition, most all of them, if they auditioned, they got a part. Because I'm very big on that. If you audition, I'm gonna try and fit you in the movie somewhere because you took the time to come out and support me. So I'll do you the favor of putting you in the movie because it's what you wanted. But in some cases, it didn't work out. In some cases, I cast people who came to audition and then they had to pull out because they just couldn't get their schedules to match up with mine. But Sarah was one of the people who came to the audition, and she read for a bunch of different parts, and this is probably going to sound bad, but I couldn't think of a spot to put her. Like, she read for Eminem, she read for Paisley. I think she read for pretty much every female role, but she read, I think when she read for Trudy, like, she just came across, like, the way she read Trudy was, the character needed to be sort of, if Eminem is like pure good, which she's not, she's a flawed character, but let's just say Eminem is pure good and Brenda is pure evil, which she's not either. She just has really bad qualities. Then Trudy would be somewhere in the middle. She needed to be good, like she needed to have values because as you can see, she was friends with popular and the unpopular kids, and she wasn't like a jerk to anyone just for the sake of being a jerk to them. It was just that she wanted to fit in with both crowds, and it was just her way of doing it. And then as time went on, she sort of felt like I identify more with these people and I don't really want to associate with them anymore, especially after what happened to Ashley. She wanted to her world was really thrown into upheaval because she sort of lost her friends with Eminem because, as she admitted, she was part of the reason why Ashley died, and obviously she would have lost her friendship with Mercedes. But the way that Sarah read for Trudy, it worked. She became the character. And then one thing I wanted to bring up really quickly was casting Kiki for Eminem. That was, I believe, the last casting decision I made. Well, no, second to last because I had to recast Marty. Excuse me. That was really tough. And then she did not even audition. I just the original actor who played Marty. They were dating at the time, and he told me, "Hey, what about my girlfriend Kiki? She could probably do a good job." So I asked her, and she was like, "Oh, I'd love to do it, yeah." And then she read, and it really worked out. And then that's another bad frame rate drop because we shot Mrs. Toto on tape. But this is actually in a completely different school now. In relation to where I live, the middle school and high school are across from each other. And all of what you've seen up to this point was shot in the high school, and now this bit is shot in the middle school. But we're trying to play it off as though it's the second story of the high school. And this is the same classroom that I had 8th grade language arts in years ago with Mrs. Toto as my teacher. She was really fun. We read Animal Farm in her class, and that's actually still one of my favorite books I've ever read for school. And I should have done a much better job framing this. I'm sorry, Mrs. Toto, but I don't know what I was thinking. You have Batman horns. You have a mini Batman cowl coming out of the back of your head. I'm sorry. I should have framed that better. And again, I believe that's my laptop she's using, but I could be wrong about that.
Was Ashley ever bullied? Did anyone ever pick on her?
No, I think that's hers. And she did a very good job. It was a lot of the. I'm very thankful that the adults that were in this movie came out to help out because, like, they're obviously where in the case of the students, they their full-time job is being a student, so only a few hours of the day they're occupied with doing anything. So the fact that all of the adult actors in this movie came out to play a role while they have the full-time jobs going on and all sorts of other stuff they need to worry about, that I was really appreciative of that. And then again, really drive home the what happened with these tech screens, because I really wanted to make sure that no plot point was left unclear. Also, a little piece of trivia: if you look very carefully in in some of the tech screens, you'll find spelling mistakes. That was also that's my bad. I didn't mean to do that, but sometimes little things slip through. Go Lehigh. Expert framing there, Jacob. Fantastic. And there behind Felicity's head, you can see the Poet of the Week board. Another funny story was we hung that up pretty much the beginning of the year, because we were planning on shooting. One of the first things we were going to shoot was one of the flashbacks classroom scenes in that room, and it never worked out. And Mrs. Toto just left that up the entire year. I believe the second to last shot we ever got was my hand coming up and pulling the paper down. So she left that up for the whole year, and I imagine her class being very confused over why that was up there. But then I also imagine her explaining to them and being like, "Oh my gosh, a movie, that sounds so cool." But knowing the 8th grade, they're probably just like, okay, whatever. Although they seemed very thrilled when well, not thrilled. They seemed very happy when with the movie when I showed it to them.
Some kids are just savages. And no matter what you do,
yeah, they seemed to like. I was actually surprised by how many people liked it. And then here enter Dr. Todt, played by Mark Keeler. He was very talented. Again, the frame rate looks terrible just because I didn't know how to match digital the digital standard of I believe that I forget what frame rate we shot the digital at, but I think the tape was shot at 29.5. I could be wrong about that, and I don't remember what the digital frame rate was, but point being, there was a slight difference, so when I tried to match them, the digital would always look choppy in comparison to the tape. And this was the scene that, as I mentioned earlier, this was the scene that we shot on the Canon GL, and that we actually couldn't use a lot of the stuff we shot because the tapes played back and had a lot of interference on them. Like, originally there was a bit where we followed them walking down the hallway right there, and they had more dialogue, but all of that was basically ruined to be by the camera for some reason. But most everything from here on out was usable. So I solved that by just having them read the lines, and then I played it in a voiceover before we cut to the scene. This was the first scene Felicity shot, if I'm not mistaken, and her hair length also changed in between seeing Mrs. Toto and seeing Dr. Todt. I'm not Mrs. Toto, Ms. Lehrer, excuse me. I'm forgetting the lore of my own movie. And this was also, oh god, this was another really stupid thing, but the object she's holding and what she's using as the tape recorder throughout the majority of the movie, that's actually an external mic for the camera, so we can get better audio than what was on the onboard mic. So it's just, I find it so stupid because there's no tape recorder that looks like that. But we had to do it again out of necessity. And also that shot, I can't hear it, and you're probably not going to be able to hear it that well either, but that line where she goes, "Thank you, but what do you think I'm getting at?" There's several points in the movie where we had audio problems where we got like a noise or something that would happen while the character was talking, and the noise would be too distracting for me to just leave in. So there were a few cases where I would just I would take audio from a completely different take, line it up as best I could and hoped it looked natural. And for some reason, every single time I did that, it looked perfect. At least to me, anyway. There was one moment earlier where when Mr. Orr takes Mary Ellen aside and tells her, "Hey, you need to be careful," and she goes, "I'm sorry. It won't happen again." He says, "It better not." When he says, "It better not," that was also audio from a different take. That probably didn't match up as well, if I'm remembering correctly. If I'm remembering correctly. But and then there's also when he's leaving at the end of the interviews, he goes, "All right, I'll see you tomorrow." Then that was also from a different take, and I think that matched up a little bit better just because his mouth was off screen. And this shot I actually really like. I don't really like to be. I don't really like to say, "Oh, I'm such a good cinematographer," because I'm not. I'm a better editor and director than I am with moving the camera and doing fancy stuff like zooms and tracking shots and all that. But I like the way that shot came out. And this is sort of at the point where we've introduced we've introduced all but two of the interview subjects. So now is the point where we cut back to other characters and they give us a bit more information before we cut to Duwain and Brent. And again, very good job on Hannah's part because the script called that she cried, and she did actually cry. Her and Morgan both. They were in their scenes. I had it written that they start crying. In Morgan's case, it was a bit more. The script called for a bit more of a dramatic cry, like your standard tears and what's the term? Like wobbling voice, I guess. I don't think that's right, but tears and like shaky voice. There we go. Tears and like shaky voice and sort of being a little hysterical, but not terribly. And Hannah's and her lines called for a more quiet kind of silent crying, and they both knocked it out of the park. They did exactly what I needed them to do, and it turned out. I think their performances were very, very well done. And here's Evan again. This, I probably should have done away with this shot just because, like, that head turn, I don't know why. I don't really like that in hindsight, but whatever. Yeah, there's some shots in here I wish I could take back, but practice makes perfect, I guess. Also, something else, just to mention, just out of not really having much to say at this point, was whenever with the exception of maybe one scene, I think it was the scene. Excuse me, and they had the scene with Felicity and Morgan. No, it wasn't because we shot one scene with Felicity and Morgan there together, and we would turn around to get Morgan's side and then get Felicity's side of it. Not like flip flopping between lines and all that. We got all of Morgan's stuff and then we got all of Felicity's stuff, but we had to reshoot Morgan's stuff because of tape problems with the camera we were using. But with all of the actors were not in the same room with each other whenever we shot their lines. So what we did was we took my laptop that had the script on it, and we zoomed it in so they could see the text better, and we set the laptop at Felicity's eye level or the interview subject's eye level, and then they would just read off of the laptop. In Felicity's case, she actually made she is sort of a trained actress, so she was able to memorize her lines beforehand a lot easier, but we still had the laptop there as a safety net, just for the sake of getting through everything a little bit quicker. But most everybody else, they only got their lines the day of, or I had sent them their lines and they just didn't have the chance to read them until the day of. So we had the laptop set up for them to read off of. And enter Couper, who was stepping in for somebody else, and he did a good job. That frame rate again. Again, Felicity's on tape and Cooper's on digital. Although between these two, this actually doesn't look that bad. Couper was also sort of the, I guess, if I had to assign him another role aside from actor, I'd assign him as a producer. Because he drove me around a lot, and he was a big moral support in finishing the movie. So, and he's a good friend of mine. I owe a lot to him. He's always there for me. Whenever I have a stupid idea and I'm like, hey, I want to turn this into a video, he's like, yeah, go for it. Excuse me. And here we're about to get Drew Schell is going to answer, playing Brent. And he also did a fantastic job. And like I said, he also wrote the opening credits song. And another song that we didn't use for the movie called Here I Stay, which I had a good spot for it in the original script, but like I said, we didn't shoot the original script, so we couldn't fit that song anywhere. Again, she's writing random stuff in the notebook. I like this. A lot of the dialogue, I feel I should have done a second draft on, or not a second draft. I should have rewritten a lot of the dialogue, because I tend to write things. I tend to write monologues that go on far longer than they need to, and I feel like Drew has a few lines in this scene that go on much longer than they need to. But I don't have a problem with it for the most part. It's just a few times it really sticks out. And that poster that she just slid across the table, that was actually one of the when Mr. Orr did the mock trials back in 8th grade. He had these. He would have props that he would use as like actual, like as evidence. Like I don't think he brought in physical objects. He would have pictures of each of them. So he would have like pictures or scans of Ashley's notes. You can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes. Ashley's poems that he wrote to Eminem, or stuff like that. Like the Swiss Army knife that Marty used to loosen the chair and make Ashley fall. And he also had scans of the poster that the posters that Marty made for the bands when he would have his parties. Also, I don't know if you can tell, but we shot all of this stuff, with the exception of the ending. All of this was shot after school, so we were pretty much the only students in there. So whenever we're shooting in the library, with the exception of Hannah's half of the final scene, we were doing it after school, so the only lights that we had on in the library were the lights that were directly over us. So this was like the only corner of the library that was illuminated, and then the rest was just dark. It was funny because it just kind of made for like it doesn't translate on the movie, but it made for a weird feel if you were there, because we were in this one little corner, and then the rest of the library was just pitch black around us.
Well, he's a control freak. He loves to play God.
Thank you very much for your time, Brent. You can go
Well, this actually, I don't. This is weird because I don't remember this frame rate. This transition doesn't look too bad. I'm spending a lot of time talking about that. I'm sorry. And then cut back. Couper walks in, and then we transition into our sort of final act. This movie doesn't really have acts. I think it's more of just like an elongated series of. No, it literally is an elongated series of conversations. But yeah, I guess if you had to assign first, second, and third act, I guess this is the beginning of the third act. And I believe we bring back Kiki in this scene. No, that we go back to Morgan first. So, and again, fantastic job on Morgan's part right here.
You didn't know what was going on.
You can't really see that well, but I believe she actually did have tears. She was physically crying when this scene happened. I probably should have had the box of tissues on the table for every scene, because it feels like the only time the tissues are ever visible is when somebody's crying. I find that funny. Also, Mr. Orr, another fun piece of trivia. If you go back, we were very careful in trying to get Felicity's clothing to match up with our timeline that we had, but for whatever reason, I didn't keep track of what Mr. Orr was wearing that well. So there's times where there's pretty much every scene in the movie he's in, with the exception of the scene. No, that didn't even match up. Never mind. There's his top is always changing. He's always wearing some different sweater or long sleeve shirt. I feel like except for actually no, I was wrong. The one scene where it matches up is when Eminem is being interviewed. The sweater that he's wearing at the beginning and the sweater he's wearing at the end are the same. And again, Kiki did a really good job here. I didn't want Eminem to cry in this scene because she wasn't as emotionally attached to Ashley as Paisley or Mercedes were. She wasn't good friends with Ashley. She didn't know him that well, so it just felt weird that she would cry over him. So I just had her. I had her be upset. I wanted her to feel guilty over what happened to him. Like, had she handled the situation differently, then he would still be alive. I wanted that to be the thought that was always in the back of her head. And then this was sort of meant to be Mr. Orr goes, your time is up. This is the end of the final interview, and Mary Ellen is also, her psychology is a little bit difficult to figure out as well, because she wants to bring Ashley justice and she wants to figure out what happened by interviewing these people, but at the same time she doesn't really want to get to know them. She doesn't want to. She's kind of detached from them, if that makes sense. Like when she tries to comfort Eminem there, it doesn't really, it comes off as genuine, but it feels like she doesn't know what to say, and I really wanted that to be a part of her little speech. And those two shots of Mr. Orr that you just saw, that was the last thing we shot, because we had to go back and reshoot those scenes because we just didn't get to shoot them when we were doing Felicity's last day of shooting. And that was actually shot on the day that I graduated high school, so it literally took me the beginning to the end of the very end of my senior year. But then going back to what I was saying before, was when she's comforting Eminem, it's not a part of Eminem is not a group party or a group part of a group that she identifies with, so she doesn't really know what to say, but she's better at consoling Paisley and Mercedes, because that is, I feel like, if she had to fit in either of those two cliques, I guess, although they're not really cliques, those two groups, then she would fit in best with Paisley and Mercedes, so she can identify not more well. That was a bad sentence. She can identify better with them. I'm not even sure if that's a good sentence either. Oh god, this guy. Like I said, the original actor who played Marty had to step out for different reasons. One was one of the major reasons was I didn't really the first scene. Okay, no, I lied. The first scene we shot for with Felicity in it. It was the second scene we shot overall. The first scene didn't end up making the cut. It was the deleted scene where Ty drops off Eminem after a party. But the original scene with Marty in it took place outside of the high school, and what happened was it showed Mary Ellen leaving, and she catches Marty in the middle of a drug deal, and that is what set her over the edge and made her want to confront him, especially with the newfound knowledge that he is the one responsible. But we couldn't use the original scene because when I edited it together the first time, I used I put music over it, and it was this sort of dramatic score, and I liked it when I put it in, but then as time went on, I didn't like it as much. It didn't work. It felt way too pretentious to leave it in. So, but then the problem was I didn't back up the raw footage, so I couldn't re-edit it. And then we also, without going into too much gory detail, out of respect for my friend and not naming names, but he and Kiki, like I said, they were dating and they sort of split. So it didn't. I don't know. It felt weird keeping him in the. Originally, it was we had more scenes to shoot that had him and Kiki in it, and I didn't want to recast him. And then I just sort of felt like, okay, well, I don't have the raw footage, so we can't shoot this again because he doesn't want to do it again. So I'll step in and replace him. And one thing I was going to say earlier was I don't know that Mary Ellen and Marty had any bad blood in the past, like prior to this. Maybe they did. That's something to ask Mr. Orr. But this confrontation it needed to really feel bitter, like they were both. Well, not really bitter on Mary Ellen's part. Like, she was out for blood, and Marty was just like, he's had to deal with, excuse me, he's had to deal with this whole long ordeal throughout, basically, from the end of his junior year up until basically the end of his senior year in context with the story, and he's just tired of dealing with it. He doesn't have to worry. He doesn't want to have to worry about Ashley anymore. So I just wanted him to come across as, God, why does this keep happening? And I wanted Mary Ellen to be like, to really be. I feel like in her heart of hearts, she knew that she couldn't convince him to feel guilt over what happened. But she kind of realized at the end, I can't make him feel guilty, but I can tell him that he's going to have to live the rest of his life knowing this. And that's ultimately the best comeuppance he can receive. And then this scene, again, huge thanks to Mr. Rod Luckenbill. He's actually a principal of a school in my area in real life. And he played the principal of this fictitious school, and he did a fantastic job. Especially since he didn't know his lines until we shot it. So like the reason why he keeps glancing down is because he has the script in front of him, but we were supposed to play it off as he has the notes that Mary Ellen has been working on for her project, and I wanted it to seem like the school district is very much aware of what happened with Ashley, and they just want to sort of forget about it. They don't want to have to deal with what happened anymore, and they don't like they're hesitant that Mary Ellen is trying to drudge up all this information, but they're willing to accommodate, and then they find out how far she wants to go for it, and they don't agree with it. And one of the reasons why I really like this scene, especially since it comes immediately after the previous scene, is that in the previous scene, Mary Ellen is out for blood. She's very aggressively trying to confront Marty, and here she's the one being confronted, and she's remaining passive when she sort of retorts back, although I'm not sure that that's the right word, but when she comes up with her defense, that's she's still just as aggressive, but it's more passive. And I felt like it's, again, juxtaposition is not the word, but it felt like a nice balance. Like you saw her, I guess to put it in court terminology, for what she wants to do with her life, it shows how good she is at being both prosecution and defense. So, yes, I really like the way that they played this scene. Also, Felicity was very sick the day we shot this. I forget if she had mono or no, she had a head cold. And she couldn't really remember her lines that well, so getting her to do this really long monologue was very difficult. So what we did was I went through and I highlighted every major point that she had to get out, and I made bullet points and said, you can improvise the monologue, but be sure to mention these points. And we did maybe 3 to 4 takes of that, and I just sort of edited together the best of each take to get the final monologue. And it was very much close to how I had it written, but she couldn't recite it verbatim just because she was really under the weather that particular day. And I like that line when Mr. Orr turns around a lot, because that just feels like it feels like, again, I don't know that these characters have history, but it feels like every student has the one class that they're really good at, and Mr. Orr, in the context of this story, is like an American government teacher, and I feel like when he would have taught the judicial system, Mary Ellen would have been like the student who was the most into it and having the most fun with that course. So it feels like they would have had a really good teacher-student relationship. So it just felt like they've been through all this stuff with the interviews, and now at the end of it all, Mr. Orr's just like, oh, you're a natural lawyer, just sort of like cracking a joke to, like, I guess show how proud he is of her, like, to basically a proud teacher of a student who has come a long way, I guess. And that t-shirt is not coincidental at all. That was an accident. And there's Matt. Sorry. My friend Matt was in that shot, as Hannah was walking up. He's also technically one of the producers on the movie, although in name only. Not to knock him, he's one of my best friends, but he wasn't that into film, so he didn't really play a major part. Although the hand that gives Mr. Orr the paper in the scene when he goes, I'm gonna have to, I need to sign your paperwork. The reshoot stuff that I mentioned that we did on the day I graduated, that was Matt's hand handing him the paper. And when Hannah Reeder hands over the poetry book to Felicity, that was Matt's hand receiving the book. So he ended up playing an invisible part, I guess, for the movie. And then that document that's on her computer screen, that's actually a transcript of the revised edition of Mr. Orr's Yours Anonymous book. like that is that is the it's like a second edition, I guess, of the of what he originally wrote. So what we did was to make it. I didn't want to type a bunch of gibberish on the screen and then have somebody read it because I don't like it. Like when you see like a phone book in a movie and you see that all the numbers are 555, or if you're looking at a newspaper and you pause the movie and you read it, like the articles are all gibberish or non-important stuff. I like to have like little things like that connected. Well, not connected. I like to have little things like that actually be what they're supposed to be. So I changed the title of the book on the document, untitled as of yet, and then for dramatic effect, I had Felicity type here as anonymous. And there she is walking away with my laptop. Also, a little continuity error. If you notice, there were more tables set up behind her in the previous shot when she was typing. That was because when we shot that, we had this special exhibit set up in the library for this guest speaker we had come and visit us. And we had to reshoot some stuff in the ending when she walks away. And it just made a continuity error because that stuff wasn't there when we did the reshoots. And again, another great Gatsby reference as we end the movie. And now we begin the text scroll of all the people that I need to thank for the credits. Me, first of all, thank you, me, for coming up with the idea to do this and write and direct, of course. I'm just kidding. Seriously, though, thank you, Mr. Orr, for coming up with this story and writing the book and doing all the mock trials and everything, because I wouldn't have done this without you. And Couper and Rob, thank you so much, both for producing and helping shoot it. Rob, you did a good job helping me shoot it, and thank you so much for letting me use your camera in some points. Couper, thank you for being great moral support and driving me around a lot. Not just during this movie, but to, like, everywhere. Oh, now here comes the cast. The song you're hearing, by the way, is Anonymous by SSQ. It was this old song that I heard while watching an independent movie called Beyond the Black Rainbow. The movie itself wasn't that good, but I liked the end credit song, and it kind of reminded me of this story, so I used it. Future reference, don't use music that you don't have the rights to. Thank you so far. Okay, Felicity, sorry, I talked over you guys. Felicity, Hannah, Kiki, Evan, Brynne, Couper, Sarah, Morgan. Sorry if I missed anybody, but thank you to the entire cast and crew for the cast anyway. I was pretty much the one-man crew, except for Rob on some days. But thank you to the entire cast for helping me make this reality. I appreciate all the hours that you guys put into it, or I shouldn't say all the time that you guys put into it, because without you, I just have a script, some borrowed cameras, and an idea of going, this might be fun. So thank you guys for taking my script and Mr. Orr's story and turning it into a reality. James Rolfe, that guy right there, I put him under moral support. Some of you may know him as the Angry Video Game Nerd. He's a producer on YouTube, and he has his own site, and I'll plug real quick, called cinemassacre.com. He was the guy that originally got me into doing internet videos, and from there, filmmaking. And he was making his first big Hollywood feature film at the same time that I was working on this, so it was cool to listen to what he was going through and find similarities in what I was going through, so I owe him my livelihood, I guess. And thank you for watching this and listening to me talk for an hour and 4 minutes now. Probably it's going to be an hour and 5 or 6 minutes and a few, but thank you for watching this movie and indirectly supporting it because of that. This is truly what I love to do, and without you guys, I lost where I was going with that. But without you guys, I would still be doing what I'm doing, but it wouldn't be nearly as gratifying. Not that I need the gratification to do it. It's just that it matters when you're down and out, and you need people to support you. It's always nice to see that there's like-minded people. And on that note, I bid you adieu. Bye.